Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just like faster in my experience. So, I can just send my email in the chat.
Okay.
You know.
And if I'm not wrong, all the judges' paradigms are in all the judges' emails are in their paradigms. Okay. Then I'll just quickly send out like a quick like email chain to test if it works. Okay, so I just sent out the email chain. Uh, tell me if like tell me when you get it, and then yeah.
Received.
Is everyone ready to start? Or
You go.
okay. Okay, time starts on my first word. We negate the result the United States federal government substantially increased its investment in domestic nuclear energy. Professor Nixon Robb explains that because of our conventional interpretation of violence is a event focused on the time bound, we ignore the long dyings of structural violence that accumulate in the form of staggering casualties, which causes us to severely miscalculate how much harm we actually do. This causes us to treat structural violence casualties as disposable, which affects the projected casualties of future impacts and increase the threshold of imposing damage upon others. Connection with environmental racism. Example 8. Rely on indigenous lands. Trade war blocks off most foreign exports. This means the U.S. is forced to go domestic. Abs 23. Russia's dominance over nuclear power supplier and rich nuclear plants rely on Russia maintenance fuel supply. Market susceptible disruption. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan producing half of supply vulnerable to Russia. Russia could block transit. Its military interference, new routes unlikely. Russia exert these type of pressures to disrupt these trades. And uranium is key for nuclear energy that will come from indigenous lands. Wilson Center 24. American Indian lands are estimated to include 50% of the U.S. potential uranium reserves. The amount could actually meet for most of all of future medium-term or domestic demand growth. The biggest single radioactive release in American history occurred in Navio land in 1979 with the collapse of the containment dam at UNC's Church Rock uranium mill in New Mexico, a mill that fed civilian power reactors. There are still over 4,000 formerly producing and now abandoned uranium mines, still impacting the tribal communities. Tribal territory host thousands of AMU still waiting for cleanup. Subpoint B is waste. Indigenous lands have been targeted for nuclear waste storage. Maxwell's War 22. The federal government has intentionally singled out and targeted Native American reserves as potential repositories for high-level nuclear waste. The Nuclear Waste Policy Act authorizes the creation of monitors retrieval storage (MRS) facilities to store the nation's nuclear waste, and the Native American reservations were also targeted as deal sites for MRS facilities. Financial incentivized for nuclear waste storage on native land has been described as a form of economic racism akin to bribery. When the Yukon Mountain was chosen as a site for the nation's principal reservoir for nuclear waste, the Western Shoshone were never consulted and never asked for consent or acknowledged as original owners of the land. Trump's administration is attempting to rock back monument protections on the public lands. Corona 23. When Secretary Doug Burgum issued an order Monday directing these federal employees to review and revise all these public lands with withdrawals. And discriminatory regulations make it difficult for Native communities to gain compensation for radiation exposure. Kenya 24. Much of the policy recourse made available for communities is limited to procedural objections for future projects and requests for compensatory reparations after the health impacts are already felt. While the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act (RECA) represents a landmark legislation, it only provides a one-time compensation for former uranium mine workers experiencing illegible illnesses. RECA applications allow a lengthy process that requires birth certificates and proof of employment for claimants, documents that have many Native American uranium workers might not have. Uranium mining and milling in general hurts poor communities. Benefits extend to white communities. Department of U.S. Energy 23. Reactors often benefit from wider and wealthier communities. Nuclear fuel cycle facilities such as uranium mining and milling of the U.S. weapons programs have been disproportionately harmed for low-income communities and communities of color. Mining threatens indigenous people. Milwaukee 23. The industry is still not properly regulated, and environmental health risks such as radiation exposure, water contamination persist. She said that the tribal nations have been especially harmed by the historical and existing operations, with thousands of abandoned mines and sites especially remaining contaminated. Impact is twofold. Number one, mining causes slow violation and fused decision making with the logics of a resource extraction ensuring indigenous genocide. Bartov Nicholas 20. Mining often gives rise to accelerated forms of social discrimination among local communities, livelihoods of deprivation contested over lands and scarce resources. Global reliance on these extractions of non-renewable sources unleash new forms of inequality linked to these environmental destruction and forced the dislocation and privatization of common property and modern forms of wage slavery. Number two is health impacts. Nuclear waste is dangerous to waterways. Washington proves in Mach 14. We're saying that a quiet crisis has been building and considers the threat of radioactive waste. Uranium and titanium and other materials were found in migrating in Los Alamos in the Rio Grande. Even if the fraction was radioactive migrants into water bodies, the problem could be unfixable. The energy department has been trying to reclassify dangerous waste as low energy waste and can pour into clumps into tanks or simply just cap the dumps and leave the waste in place, creating a DO factor level nuclear and titanium waste dumps in close proximity to principal water resources is wrong. Therefore, you must vote for the neg. Thank you.
Can I call for a couple pieces of evidence before Ranesh begins the 1AC?
Is it okay if we can do it like after your speech?
I guess, but it'd be preferable if we like see it now.
Yeah,
Okay,
can we
so
get
what
it
cards would you
before,
like?
just so we can like read through the evidence during
Oh, that's,
speech?
yeah, sure. What type of evidence or which evidence do you want?
Okay, can I see the evidence on on the framing on SV? Can I see the evidence that uh the uranium mining and the nuclear waste we put onto indigenous lands? And
Yeah,
then can I see the evidence that Trump is gonna roll back regulation?
yeah. My partner's sending in that right now.
Sent.
Okay. I'll tell you when we get it.
All right, I just got it.
Ranesh, can we take a little bit of prep time before kids?
Yeah. All right, that's gonna, I'll just show you like on the screen when I start the stopwatch.
I think you guys entered my email wrong for the email chain. Oh, it's student, not students.
Oh, okay. Let me quickly just fix that. Wait, since you sent the evidence doc, can you just forward the email chain to them? Or do you want like actually I can just forward it.
And then I pause prep at 12 seconds, by the way.
I can just forward it. You guys can take prep. It's fine.
Rich, do you know how to like forward the email in the email chain? Like how to add the email to the email chain instead of just doing a forward?
I don't think so. I think you just
I'll just forward. I guess whenever you call for evidence, I can add you to the chain then. That'll probably be better, but we can resume prep starting. Ranesh, start. Can you pull the timer?
oh my bad. Okay, pause it there. That was an additional 25 seconds, which means we've used 37 seconds so far. And then, yeah, it's just going to go framing case. And that's going to start on my first word. We affirm at the top for extinction. If we're all dead, we can't solve for structural violence. And two, objectivity. All arguments link to some form of violence, and there's no way to weigh between differing forms of structural violence, making irresolvable rounds. Utilitarianism is the most objective way to calculate impacts, and comparing suffering is unethical because it causes a race to the bottom, i.e., like who's suffering more, and it's like really, yeah, just unethical. With that being said, on case, C1 is American hegemony. American adversaries dominate nuclear energy. Cohen 24 China is far ahead of the U.S. in nuclear energy with 23 power plants under construction. China's built upon this expertise to begin supplying reactors abroad. The U.S. has lost nearly a third of its operational nuclear reactors, but almost two new ones, and its average reactor age is decades old. Cohen 24. Russia exported over $1 billion worth of nuclear energy. Two of the countries are NATO members, and America's losing influence. Policy Circle 24. American hegemony might end by 2025. China's reoriented global economic networks, particularly in the global south. Domestic production is critical to hegemony. Hillitbron et al. 24. Failure to complete overseas will enable China and Russia to erode their influence. China and Russia have the state-owned nuclear industries that are a key part of their efforts to gain allies and influence. The U.S. must rapidly finance nuclear reactors, affirming enables exports. Bowen et al. 20. Since it's difficult to export product that lacks a domestic market, policy support for advanced reactors in the U.S. is imperative. Exports secure positive global relations. Graham 19. Supplier country and the developing countries typically forge a relationship that endures. Russia and China have identified nuclear energy as a strategic export. If the U.S. fails to complete commercial markets, it'll cede leadership. U.S. global competitiveness and leadership are inextricably linked to strong domestic nuclear program. U.S. hegemony deters multiple revisionists. Igatanef 24. North Korea, Iran, Russia, and China might risk a joint military challenge. Deterrence kept the axis divided. Both China and Russia believe that there will never be a more opportune moment to overthrow American hegemony. Great power war will be detrimental. Claire 21. Great power war conflict is a risk factor. Breakdown in cooperation. Weapons with the potential to kill everyone could be used. Contention 2 is power demand. The U.S. is set to lose the AI race. Sahalsky 25. Major U.S. AI companies have expressed concern over China's AI development. America's edge in AI is dwindling. Chinese models like DeepSeek R1 become more advanced. Additionally, data center demand is skyrocketing. Nordkist 24. With the increasing importance of energy-intensive AI, the power needs of the U.S. will grow, but shortages are restricting data centers. Patel 2025. The data center industry is scrambling to procure scalable energy to sustain its explosive growth power. Shortages could restrict 40% of AI data centers. Small modular reactors would meet demand. Abondo 24. SMRs offer significant advantages for contractors, simplifies construction, reduces timelines, and requires less land, well suited for powering data center. SMR reactors would meet demand. Obando 24. SMRs offer significant advantages for contractors, simplifies construction, reduces timelines, requires less land, well suited for powering data center. Government support is needed until 2025. Insurance providers are hesitant. Tax credits, loan guarantees, and direct financing are essential to companies' ability to secure debt and produce cost of capital. Incentives need to expand. Shortages will kill the AI race. Lead 2025. Power shortages have emerged as existential threats to the AI race. Data centers sustain AI workloads. Domestic development is necessary for the U.S. to beat China. Allison and Schmidt 20. AI is an existential priority. The U.S. can and must win. China is using technology to perfect dictatorship. China's on a trajectory to overtake the U.S. in the decade ahead. AI technologies will be drivers of their future economic growth and national security. Koenig 21. New technology will to the U.S. will reinforce stability of China acquired an enhanced ability through new technology and may be more confident in its ability to achieve an attack against a neighbor and then block a U.S.-led liberation. Shifts in the balance of power lead to war. There will be a nuclear escalation. Nuclear war causes extinction. Star 14. Small nuclear war would include catastrophic disruptions of global climate and massive destruction of ozone. A global famine would result in a war fought with less than half of the U.S. nuclear weapons would destroy the human race. And then one more thing at the top, or well, kind of an overview. Current renewables are unviable for the foreseeable future. Osaka 25 executive order mandates to halt all wind leasing in federal waters. It's doubtful that much progress will be made. Renewables are falling short of expectations. Problems supply chains are getting permits and approval to build has put a damper on development. Renewables need to be built at hundreds of or thousands of miles away, which then requires large, long-distance transmission lines to move power. Renewables will also take up more space. The grid was never designed to handle this load. I'm good for cross.
Okay, let me just start my timer. Time starts now. May I have the first question, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your link for the U.S. hegemony?
We just say that. Wait, let me. Okay. Yeah, the Hildebrand 24 evidence says that failure to compete overseas will enable China, Russia to erode influence. Yeah, so basically it's like competition kind of. So basically affirming allows it to better compete with other global powers.
Okay, wait, can I have a follow-up question for that?
Sure.
Okay, so you argue that like U.S. must use like nuclear reactors to like extend its like global power. So like what specific like aspects of nuclear energy gives the U.S. a unique advantage in like these international affairs that like other energy sources don't provide?
Yeah, so that's the Bowen evidence, which says since it's difficult to export a product that lacks a domestic market, policy support for advanced reactors in the US is imperative.
Can I have the card later, if that's fine?
Yeah, sure. Just like remind me after cross, I'll probably forget.
Okay, let me just write this down real quick. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I'm gonna take a question now.
Okay.
Just like on your case in general, you cite a ton of empirics that say that the US has been like increasingly more like has been like increasingly worse towards these like minorities. Does that not mean that like the only risk to stop that is affirming? Like otherwise it's just gonna like we're just gonna be stuck in the same cycle of just like being bad towards minorities.
No. Can I ask another question now?
Wait, why?
Because okay, so like in your world, you're just making it way worse for indigenous people because the trade war blocks are like the most form. This means like the U.S. is forced to go domestic, and we're saying that like you like these
Wait,
saying
the
that
US is
indigenous people have been like targeted for. Or sorry, I read the wrong part, but indigenous lands have been like targeted for nuclear waste, and by having increasing substantial of this nuclear waste. Nuclear in general, you're creating more waste, and therefore it's all that waste is being put on indigenous lands, hurting these Native Americans that have no say in these policies because companies have more power than these people.
Yeah, okay. So if we just disprove like the waste point, then your case doesn't really have offense, right? Under your framework.
Mining, we have mining. Oh, my partner would talk about this in his speech.
Sure.
Um,
You question.
okay. Um, okay, so you say that like the US would lose an AI to like China due to power like these power demands. So like what data shows that the lack of domestic like nuclear energy is like primarily for this like AI development in like the US rather than other factors like talent, funding, or research.
Yeah, so the uniqueness is not specific to nuclear energy, but the link is. Basically the uniqueness is just that the US is set to lose the AI race, but yeah,
Okay.
but because of like power shortage stuff like that, and then SMR is basically solved back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then which card did you ask for?
I think you said, is it Bones? Did you say that? Or did you say
Oh,
Bones?
the Bowen evidence?
Yeah, Bowen. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, sure.
We'll start prep as soon as we receive card.
Yeah. Vijay, are you sending that or should I? Okay, I just went ahead and sent the Bowen evidence. You're muted, by the way, Vijay.
Did you add the email because it was mistyped?
Oh, no, I forgot.
I can do that because I'm sending it right now.
Okay, perfect.
Could you resend it to my partner then? I got the email, but she hasn't. So
Yeah, I just resent it with the new email. Tell me if your partner also gets it.
okay, Katie, check your email.
Didn't receive it.
Okay, it might take a second. Okay, cool, we got it. We'll take about 30 seconds of prep time. Time starts. All right, that was 36 seconds. Pause prep there. Yeah, just on their case. Framing their case. Time begins on first word. Preferred structural violence are urgent bodies that experience violence daily outweigh. Also, 2015 telling you the large-scale threats of future sovereignty distort moral reasoning. The urgent body must be bypassed because there are bigger scales to worry about. The urgency to secure Western state, the economy, and climate creates new scales and temporal orders. Bodies currently suffering cannot be urgent because they are excluded from the potential collectivity that can be suffering everywhere under some future time. The urgent body is obscured through technical planning. This is a built-in bias for action. Then, which means that you have to outweigh on urgent bodies that experience violence right now because they're always miskept and always discarded from the evidence. But then on you to understand the utilitarian calculation of risk are unethical and justify existentially genocidal violence. Oliver 23 tells you that util calculation reduce human life. They're never objective survival value relatively to goals that defy risk analysis. This does not and cannot address the singularity of each living being. There's always a remainder that cannot be calculated. It is not just a matter of gathering the relevant data elements and a factor calculation that we can never know. This is an ethically imperative rather than apathy keeps us searching for justice. The possibility of justice, no excuse for not attempting it every single day. Risk benefit analysis because justification for allowing some to die when those allowed to feel certain to be in their decisions, they risk a slippery slope. Then understand the util like thinking of and justify the means literally like outweigh and justify slavery because slavery has benefited the majority of America before it was, but clearly it like this didn't do it. Then on US hedge. One China expert with slow wills 24 tells you that China is rarely motivates resources to support nuclear, more preoccupied with domestic commitments and IBBI and focused on other energy failures to pass nuclear agreements, making China unlikely to build overseas. Then two-term because pursuit causes short-termism and extinction. Pamela 19 tells you that attempts to revive hedge will efforts to deal with existential threats. Hegemony argue Washington should never make concessions. Ring fencing failed to achieve cooperation. Short-term incentivize accumulate, override the need for global governance to result in climate change and war. Then third, non-unique Trump thumbs. SCMP 25 tells you that Trump is upending the world order. China unlocks new strategic opportunities under its belt and road infrastructure. The Trump stock has been met with pushback from Europe and elsewhere. Fourth, leadership is literally impossible. We're two behind. Gardner 24 tells you that the US is 15 years behind China on nuclear power. China has 27 reactors under construction. China rapid deployment of produces scale economies and learning by doing. China's banks can offer loans as low as 1.4%, which means that we have to prove that we're actually going to be able to get to like whatever 15 years that we're behind before we get to China on nuclear and actually getting ahead of us in hegemony. Then on AI. What if nuclear energy is being used to power LA? Millions of jobs will be lost. How 24 states that 300 million can be lost due to AI. 40% of all workers been displaced from the jobs of AI. Then two technical companies that use AI already switched to 100% renewable energy, enough to support AI. At January 21 tells you them while running 100% renewable energy for nearly 3 years, Apple has been helping research of renewable energy goals. Google has used 100% renewable for 4 consecutive years. Third, even if AI needed more energy to power itself, nuclear plants would take too long to construct, making an issue and need of resilience and renewable resources like solar and wind. And peers show this is including the volatile plant in Georgia that was significantly delayed and required way more money than needed. Fourth, AGI will misalign. Your RLHF training makes it inedible. NGO 25 tells you that AGI comes with serious risk. AGI pursue unintended goals. AGI may pose highly challenging to robustly align. If AGIs are trained deep learning techniques, human feedback comes tension while minimizing incentives. Then understand the Mark 24 also tells you that if unchecked, AI pose existential threat. AI safety is lost far behind if AI evades human control. Also, in the long run, SMRs are much worse for the environment. TV 22 continues that a new recent study by the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences at Stanford University and the University of British Columbia assessed the 3 SMRs related to the nuclear waste they created and surpassed that of 1,100 MV pressures reactor by 35 times. University researchers revealed that SMRs will produce more voluminous and chemically physically reactive waste. Researchers contend that the radioactivity discharge 3 SMRs would be at least 50% higher. Finally, understand that nuclear plants aren't even good with grid, as they've been known to fail multiple times, like the Texas heat wave, where they completely failed and they had to make solar and make wind to barely get through with it, and 45 million people went without power. Therefore, we strongly urge you to vote on a negation ballot.
Can I call for a couple pieces of evidence?
Yep.
Can I see AGI misaligns, AI poses existential threat, SMR nuclear waste, and then the first 2 responses on hedge?
Okay. Might be take a second to send that. Oh, you want an SMR too, right?
Yeah.
I think it's this one.
And sorry if I'm kind of like overloading you, but in like once you're done with that, just the evidence you read on the framing debate.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, you wanted the SMRs, the framing, and the first 2 responses, right?
SMRs, framing, and then AI miscalculates, and then
Yeah.
the first 2 responses on hedge.
Okay. First 2 responses on hedge, and
And we'll start.
I think all of them are close. Sorry.
That's good. We'll start our prep whenever we just get the email.
The order might be like really messed up, by the way, because yeah. Please let me know if I'm missing anything.
Okay. I'll start prep whenever I get the evidence. Wait, real quick, I'm really sorry, but can you also just send the Trump thumbs evidence and also keep my mic muted, like unmuted, so you know I'm not prepping.
Yeah. Trump thumbs. That was the 3rd one, right? Yeah. Did you get the first email?
Yeah, I got the first email, but wait,
I just sent the Trump thumbs.
I'll start prep whenever I get the Trump thumbs email. Okay, I just got the Trump thumbs email, so I will start my prep starting now.
Wait, really quickly, were the responses to framing sent?
I think they're at the bottom. You might have to click like view entire message.
Okay. Wait.
Oh wait, sorry, I forgot this one card. Sorry. Oh shoot. Oh, I
We'll,
didn't read all of
we'll
this.
pause
I
prep.
should-
We'll pause prep while you send the card. I think it was at like 25 seconds.
Oh, shoot. Wait, do you see the other ones now?
Yeah.
So I sent the last framing card. This is just the part that I read. If it like cuts off at a paragraph, it's because like this is like all the parts that I read.
Okay, I think we just
Let me just like make sure real quick.
Do you see the Oliver 23 and the Anderson 04 card?
Oh wait, urgent bodies that experience violence daily outweigh.
is it
Yeah,
that
and then
card?
on the 2 emails ago, there should have been Oliver 23 and Anderson 04. Do you see that one?
Oliver 23, I see. And then Anderson
It should be right under it. So if you see that, that should be good.
2004.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Should have everything. Okay. And Vijay, let me know when you're
Okay. I'm good to start my speech if you are, or do you want to take prep?
yeah, I was gonna ask just take like a couple seconds.
Okay. Then
Okay.
I'll start whenever I call Renesh.
Yeah, I sent you a call.
Oh, you sent me a call. It's not coming through.
I'll send you another one. Let me just
Sorry, we're facing like a couple technical difficulties.
yeah. Are you getting it now?
No.
Okay, wait. Maybe you try calling me then.
Are you getting it?
No.
Okay, I guess we'll just start the speech then.
Yeah, it's probably fine.
Okay. The order of the speech, it'll go framing, af, neg. Framing af, neg. Is everyone ready? With that being said, my time will start now. You should prefer utilitarianism. Remember, one, if we win extinction, that fundamentally outweighs because we're all dead. You cannot solve for structural violence. But then they also, secondly, we'd argue that they've conceded the objectivity response that says it's fundamentally impossible to outweigh suffering because you can't, whenever multiple groups suffer, it's impossible to outweigh which suffering is worse because that's unethical to say, oh, we should prefer this person over like that person because this person is more more better, which on it net will probably cause more and more marginalization. They say utilitarianism justifies like slavery, but that's not true. Utilitarianism is a measure of how much happiness happens. It doesn't justify slavery because the output of happiness was like, oh, we gotta grow a few crops. It wasn't like solving extinction. Whereas the slavery still has so much negative backlash. But then we'd also argue we win war that links into structural violence because war causes poverty and exacerbates conditions across the world. But then let's go into our argument. Firstly, they tell you that hegemony and pursuit causes extinction, but what we would argue is that that's fundamentally not true. Extinction hasn't happened when the U.S. has hedge, but empirically what is going to happen is that conflict will trigger. And two, what we would argue is better to have U.S. hedge than to have Chinese-led hedge. Then they tell you Trump dumps, but what we would argue Trump fundamentally doesn't dump because our evidence finds is that uniquely nuclear energy is able to solve back for these issues, and we would argue that it's try or die. Then they tell you hegemony causes climate change. We would argue is that Chinese hegemony will cause even more climate change because they destabilize the world. So I should always prefer the U.S. hegemony. And also they say leadership, we can't catch up because it takes 15 years to build. That's why we need investment because investment speeds up times. And two, our evidence finds that right now with new nuclear developments, it's down to 36 months. But then let's go on to AI. They tell you AI takes away millions of jobs. We argue if you're all dead, then it doesn't matter. Then they tell you renewable energy is able to make it. Remember, the NSGO's consensus is renewable energy is not coming at a rate fast enough. And also, Ranesh tells you that in case the data centers are not producing energy, which means the renewables aren't working, then they tell you it takes way too long to construct. But remember the 36 months time frame for SMRs. Then they tell you AGI, missiles and AI pose extra threats. AGI will still be developed. This will be developed by China. But remember, whenever you affirm you let US-led orders, probably better to solve back for AGI and AI through better regulations. Then they tell you SMRs produce nuclear waste and nuclear plants are unsafe. That we argue with innovation, you solve back for that because you increase investments, which solves back for these issues. Let's go on to their case. At the top, we would say is there are policies already being put into place that have been put into place to prevent us from like utilizing indigenous lands, like the nuclear waste act that prevents us from like just dumping like nuclear waste onto indigenous lands. We have to get consent. But then two, what we would argue is we win climate change, we win the round. Investment needs improvement, solves the neg and outlays in scope. Round 23, it is time to move to advanced nuclear energies in safety, waste minimization, true renewability, molten solids, liquid metal and helium, recycled waste to produce fuel, mining improvements for uranium from seawater, molten solid storage systems for improving load, and refitting existing oil and gas-made refineries. Essentially, what happens is whenever you invest into things, you're able to get like nuclear like recycling, which means you don't have to even dump waste in the first place because you're recycling all the material, and you're also selling back for all the old reactors that are like emitting a lot of reduction by improving the old reactors. Secondly, also indigenous lands is already being exploited right now. They have no solvency for this, which means you don't vote on structural violence. So when you vote on AF on SV because it's try or die insofar as slow violence is already happening in the status quo. They have no fundamental solvency. There also, we argue nuclear energy is better than renewables. RBC 24 finds is that it requires 93, it produces energy 90% of the time, whereas solar and wind only produces energy 35 and 25% of the time. That means that you actually need less land and less energy. Means on net, you're going to see less climate change happens because their analysis is a 1-to-1, but you don't have a 1-to-1 in the real life. So you need 3 solar powers for like every 1 nuclear reactor, which means you see less waste produced and you see less mining that happens because solar and wind also utilize mining. And we'd argue improvements in efficiencies to shift to other things that don't like utilize uranium, and solar energy relies on like lithium mining and REM mining, which means that renewables also do mining, and affirming causes like a trade-off to nuclear energy because our evidence finds that it causes a trade-off because we can't have both, and since nuclear is better, you always prefer that.
Open for cross?
Yeah.
Right. Since I spoke first, can I take the first question?
Yeah.
Right, let's go to Chinese hedge. You tell us that like Chinese hedge is worse, or like no, you tell us that you tell us that conflict is guaranteed with Chinese hedge, and it's worse, right?
Yeah.
Right. So can I just get that card off the cross?
Well, that was the evidence that says like whenever hedge shifts, when America loses influence, that's when conflict happens. But yeah, that's like the argument, right? Like,
Right, but like you make a bunch of other arguments saying that, oh, whatever America does is better. So why is it specific that like, oh, if America developed AGI, it's better. If
yeah,
America
because it's the Ignatieff 24 evidence finds that U.S. hegemony deters multiple revisionists like North Korea, Iran, Russia, and China, which then causes like proliferation and great power wars. And whenever Russia and China believe the U.S. hedge is like down, what's going to happen at the end of this year, they start conflict. But if the U.S. hedge doesn't go down, we would argue it doesn't see that conflict happen. Like you don't see conflict happen in the first place if they see that we're investing into nuclear energy. The argument's perceptual. Can I get a question?
Yeah, I'll just take that card off the cross.
Yeah. Let's talk about your argument on mining. Don't other sources of energy like oil rely on mining?
Right, but okay, oil does, but like I think you're gonna go into renewables, so I just like talk about that. We're telling you that like uranium mining is specifically bad for indigenous people because you don't mine for oil and like you don't mine specifically for other renewables,
Wait,
specifically in
who does
indigenous.
climate change impact out the most? Like when emissions rise, who does it hurt the most?
It impacts everyone, but like we're specifically talking about
Wait,
indigenous,
specifically, who does it hurt the most?
like people in South America, I think,
It
where like
hurts. It
the
hurts
equator.
marginalized communities the most because they have the less resources to adapt because the U.S. because like structural challenges prevent them from actually being able to do that, right?
Yeah,
But and that's like we can also give you evidence for that. So if we win climate change, don't we also link into structural violence and solve for all of your impacts since mining literally happens right now and means emissions are rising right now, which means indigenous people are being hurt right now.
okay,
Like
cool.
if we win climate change, don't we win your argument?
Yeah, but we need to win climate change first.
But we win climate change, we win the arc. Okay, you can take a
If you
question.
do, yeah, sure. Actually, no. Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll take a question. On to policies. Yeah, you give us an example of nuclear waste act. Can you give us an example of like when it's actually worked, or like an example of like when it deterred nuclear waste from going in, like how much it has deterred?
What's the Can you rephrase the question?
On the nuclear waste act, can I get an example of it like happening?
I don't have an
Because
example, but we would argue we haven't seen it happen. Your empirics come from like a while ago. Like in your evidence, the empiric comes from a long while ago, and we would argue that there's no warranting for why it's going to suddenly happen on indigenous lands. When you yourself tell me not all the uranium is located on indigenous lands, there's other uranium elsewhere. And we would argue that as far as the act exists, we probably go to those areas in the first place just to avoid any like legal trouble from like the Trump government, which means that even if when the government is like racist and it like violent against indigenous people, we still have like actor analysis, but that's time. That's like a logical warrant.
I'll
Here,
take the two cards on like the
on hedge.
yeah on like China perceptual.
Yeah.
And sorry, I have one more.
Also, if it was from case, it's kind of late to respond.
But I can still send the evidence.
Yeah.
This is like card clash, so we have like both cards saying like different things.
That should have been.
Okay.
Also, I'll take the 36. Wait, was it 36 months card in case?
No, I can send it.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Mm,
We'll start prep as soon as we get it.
I sent out the email. Tell me whenever you get it.
Received. How much do you want to take for prep? Okay, we'll just take running prep. Time starts now.
We're done. Okay. Off-time roadmap, I'll be covering our opponent's points in case, and then go over our points and just like weigh on that. Is everyone ready? Okay. Go. The AF has two contingencies: the U.S. hegemony and the fear of China's AI dominance. Now let's dismantle these claims and like kind of show their flaws. So first, they argue that the U.S. must increase nuclear investments to maintain this global hegemony, but really, its true leadership building on exploiting vulnerable populations. Their vision of hegemony is where the U.S. sacrifices the health of the sovereignty of indigenous communities for the sake of this geopolitical power. We flip this. True hegemony lies in the moral leadership and demonstrating commitment to justice and sustainability by showing these like environmental like. Because of showing environmental racism, the U.S. undermines its own moral authority, handling these like propaganda tool for these adversaries, including like China. We want true hegemony, which should lead by example, not by exploitation. Second, they claim that the increased nuclear power is essential to avoid this AI race. They frame this as a matter of national security, but like at what cost? We flip this too. The AI race should be not just justified for this environmental racism. True innovation comes from the ethical development by prioritizing justice and sustainability. Now let's turn all of their evidence to center to Eurocentric idea that they're necessary imperative to defend Taiwan. Don't credit any of it. Hobson 14. We also say that. Next card, we also frontline really that affirming trades-off is less effective and lacks economic viability. So talk about the like carbon and stuff, and there's like the argument excludes funding also like helps solar and wind, but also zero warrant, so we drop it. The 36 months thing, like no, the nuclear power plants have significant lag between the planning, construction, and operation. Jacobson's 25, the time lag between the planning and operation of nuclear reactors includes the times of the identified site, and these plannings to operation PTO times of nuclear plants were overbuilt to 10 to 19 years more. And for their policies, they have no example whatsoever on like a financial incentivize better or like companies keep exploiting if there is. Okay, now let's go to our contentions. Environmental racism and nuclear waste. These are not just like concerns, they're really tangible in realities for indigenous communities. Our first condition, environmental racism, exposes the fundamental injustice of increasing nuclear investments for decades. Indigenous have been targeted for uranium mining and also water contamination, destroying these sacred sites. And to value indigenous lives, to recognize their rights, we acknowledge the past wrongs and we should actually fix these issues. Remember, when Trump rolled back on environmental protections, that showed a disregard for vulnerable communities to increase, and nuclear would be continuing that pattern over and over again. It's like a mindset of putting in industry and power over the health of well-being of marginalized communities. When we value indigenous lives, we also like value the people in our entire nation. Now let's weigh these impacts. The AF speaks of national power and tech advancements, but the benefits are abstract and just theoretical, while our impacts are actually immediate, localized, and devastating. The health of well-being of indigenous peoples should be prioritized. And to value these indigenous lives, we must recognize the inherent rights. We acknowledge that the historical injustice they have faced and commit and to rectify them. The AF's focus on national power and technological advancements ignores the fundamentals of these principles of human beings and to live clean and healthy environment for the health of the U.S. Therefore, and the impact of power is just about people. Our impact is about the future of techs and about the present urgent destruction of lives. Therefore, we urge you to reject the AF's proposal of true national security and tech advancements built upon marginalized communities. Thank you.
All right, cool. We're gonna run prep, and that's starting here. I'll just put it on the screen. Okay, we'll pause it there at 2 minutes. And then we use 37 seconds first, so we should have 23 seconds left. And that time, and okay, yeah, off-time roadmap. We'll start on framing and like how you should be evaluating the round. Then go to our case. Then we'll go for responses on theirs. Okay, And time's gonna start on my first word. On structural violence, they've conceded that structural violence is increasing right now, so you presume AF because it's try or die to solve. Then go to util. You're preferring it. 1, there's no extension of SV or why you should prefer it. 2, we can't solve structural violence if we're all dead, which makes our argument a prerequisite, which has gone conceded since literally case. 3, it's the default framework in PF. So if framework is a wash, then you're defaulting for util. 4, we're the only ones linking into util since they don't have a number of people affected and make no argument about the degree to which they're affected. Whereas we argue extinction on our side of the impacts, which has an infinite magnitude, which means that the util, whatever you're doing the calculation is infinite because it's magnitude times probability, and then like infinity times like 0.001 is still infinity. Then they weigh on probability, but probability is subjective, as people might view arguments as more probable. It encourages judge intervention, which takes the debate out of the debater's hands. And also, if we're frontlining our arguments, then it should probably have a 100% probability because we've literally given you logical analyses as to why it's true. Then, on case specifically, at the top, we're dropping hedge, and they don't weigh any of the turns on hedge or implicate them, and they're most definitely not extending the argument for us in that last speech, so you're definitely just striking it all off your flow. With that being said, go to AI. The US risks losing the AI race to China due to growing energy demands from AI data centers, which face power shortages. Small modular nuclear reactors, SMRs, can meet this demand efficiently, but need government support through tax credits and financing. Without reliable power, AI development stalls, causing extinction through nuclear warfare, which causes a nuclear winter. At that point, go to the front lines. They say renewables are solving right now, but our Osaka evidence finds that the rate of solvency isn't fast enough, means that the app's the only solution because our evidence says that nuclear energy is the best and it's the least wasteful. B, they say that hedge is bad, but remember, either China or the US will have hedge, which means hegemony is inevitable. So you prefer US hedge because it stops extinction, and our evidence says that under US hedge, there's a lot less violence that goes on across the world. C, they say that the US AI misaligns, but AI development in China still happens, so it's still a non-unique, and it's better, obviously, for the US again because it's less violent per our evidence. D, they say SMRs are bad for the climate, but comparatively to renewables, it's better because you need less land, so there's less mining, and they have conceded renewables can't solve, so it is literally try or die. With that being said, a couple responses onto their case and turns. Virtually every response out of rebuttal is like either conceded or like literally extended, or like they're just re-extending their points through ink. At the top, policies prevent us from being like bad towards like indigenous people, and they just say that we've given no examples. No, our example is that there haven't been any violations of this policy. It's their burden to prove a counterexample, which they literally don't do. 2, recyclables. New nuclear technology recycles waste, and the AF expands this tech through the investment, which replaces the bad tech, which means that we're solving back for the waste that's happening right now per their own evidence. 3, structural violence is happening right now again, so the only risk of solvency is for the AF. 4, nuclear energy is the least wasteful out of all of the energy sources we're using right now, which means it's the best for marginalized communities because they're the least like capable of defending themselves from it because they obviously have the least resources. With that being said, is a very clean ballot on structural violence, on util, on their case, on our case. All of these flow to us. I'm good for grand. And you guys can have first question.
All right. Sure. Time begins on my first question. Let's go to AI, right?
Yeah.
So do you guarantee a no misalignment with US? Because you tell us that, like AI in US will become more peaceful because generic US hedge is better.
We can't like guarantee, but we say it's probably most likely to happen under our scenarios, and we'd argue for us on risk of offense because it's literally try or die. If we don't do anything, we're going to go extinct, which means you're presuming AF if you believe, like you're always presuming AF on that side. Can we get
yeah, and then another thing is like it's not just like it's not either perfect or nothing. It's either US or China, and we say that the US is much better at keeping the peace as long as we have technological like hegemony. But yeah. Can we take a question?
Yeah.
How are you getting offense in the round?
We give you like the turn on AI, and we also like extend on waste and mining. Oh yeah, we also extend mining.
Okay, but okay,
But
so
you
all
don't
the
extend here's the thing. You don't extend responses on renewables in your summary, right?
But he
Wait, yeah.
really does.
Yeah, we said our evidence is conceded that says renewables are more wasteful
Because
and take up more land than nuclear energy,
which means
and new technology and new technology with nuclear recycles waste, which means it's basically zero waste. And affirming is the only way for us to mass implement that through because there's not enough
And
funding now.
and like also like on the point, what Ranesh also said in a speech is that because renewables take less land, renewables take more land, the comparisons that you give are bad, which means you prefer our comparisons, obviously, because it's a better holistic analysis.
Wait, so the cost of building renewables, the cost that for more land is cheaper is worse than more expensive for less land?
No,
Wait, yeah, it's just that
More
nuclear
expensive
energy.
for more land?
no,
It's
your
just that
analysis is a
nuclear energy is more
one-to-one
cost
comparison.
effective.
Wait, can you talk one at a time? Sorry, I can't understand what you're
Yeah, so the analysis is like a one-to-one comparison. It tells you two things. Firstly, it says that nuclear energy produces energy at a rate 3 times greater, which means if it's more efficient, like Ranesh said, you need less plants to do it, which means it's not your expensive analysis doesn't work because you need less plants. Two, your like analysis on your analysis on uh what you call it on cost is like not taking into account government investment, and also we say it's not a your evidence is like a one-to-one comparison, which doesn't happen. But yeah,
Okay, cool. You want to ask a question?
Yeah. So connection two was like talk about like losing China. How does the increased domestic like nuclear like specifically address China's like energy advantages in a way that like directly translate to the US winning the AI race? So what's your like impact, your mechanism of like impact in general?
wait,
So, like
can you repeat the question?
so like you said that like the US is losing to China, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Okay, so like how I'm like kind of confused on like how like the increased domestic nuclear actually addresses like China's like energy advantages in like a way that like translate to the US winning
right,
the
because
AI.
the reason we're losing is because of power, like of the shortages in our data centers, because we're suffering from power shortages. That's the issue. That's the Lee 2025 evidence. And it's the evidence finds that domestic development is necessary to beat the US. What we tell you is that if we increase investment at a rate that's much greater than the rate that China's increasing investment, which happens post-AF because we substantially increase investment into nuclear energy, we're able to essentially jump over them and like stop and like develop nuclear energy at a rate greater than them, which stops
Yeah, that's
which
it.
wins us the AI race.
Right. I took 30 seconds in my first speech, took
Yeah,
two, and just do 150.
Wait, yeah, I just had 30 seconds and 2 minutes.
Yeah, okay, I'll just take 30 seconds then. Cool. Time begins now. All right, off-time roadmap framing, neg, af, weighing. Time begins on my first word. Immediately off the top, they keep giving you this one response saying that, oh, we're going to because extinction outweighs, that doesn't mean it's bad. One, we tell you that even if there's even if the magnitude of like the 0.0001 times infinity is still infinity, we still tell you that like structural balance is preferred because like all these policies have like really low probability. So like the risk factor isn't taken into account even if like there's low probability, because you have to focus on the probability first before you go on to like the actual risk, which means that like you have to solve your domestic issues on structural balance before you go on. And again, we tell you that utilitarian calculations only like justify the lives of justify like killings of all of, like the small people, or like the small people, which has been indigenous people, for like every single time you do any sort of calculations. Then on neg, first collapse mining, they literally their only response say renewables are better. One, euro mining goes drop, which means that we're going to hit tipping point before on nuclear anyway, so that's a wash. Second, we tell you that renewables are like per watt it's better anyway, so statistically it's like better. And even if they tell you that 1-to-1 is still bad, we tell you that like, oh, even if it isn't 1-to-1, like per watt is still comparatively better. And companies are going to be looking at per like 1-to-1 ratios, and when they see that it's cheaper, they're going to go with the cheaper option like they've always done in a capitalist society. Then onto, which means that you extend our impacts through mining on structural violence and waste. No, not waste. Health. Then on the app, first AI, they like Yellow Peril dumps all their cars. They literally don't give any warrants on like why it's actually better. The only comparison is that we have less revisionism. First, they tell you that like China, even if like China goes on hedge, they don't guarantee that's going to be like lead to extension. One, because Yellow Peril, like all their authors are only going on Eurocentric ideals that they've been taught on, they've been culturally grown up on. Then on they have no comparison. They still have no solvency for the 19 years, which goes like cold conceded. Then on to weighing on to stand that let's weigh these impact. The aspects of national power and tech advancement, but the benefits are completely abstract and theoretical. No of it is guaranteed. True national security and technological advancement cannot be built on the backs of marginalized communities. We must prioritize justice over expanded dignity and human rights over technological advancement. Therefore, this is a neg ballot.
Rash, how much prep time do we have left, or do we have any?
23.
Okay, we'll run that starting now. Okay, the order of the speech is going to be framing AFNEG. Is everyone ready? That being said, my time will begin now. On structural violence, they've conceded that structural slow violence is increasing right now, which means you presume AF because it's triad to solve. That means at that point, even if they win any of the structural violence, you're still voting AF because we're the only ones with any chance of actually fixing the issues. On utilitarians, you're referring, there's no extension of SV in summary, or why you prefer a 2. We can't solve for structural violence if we're all dead in the first place. The prereq goes conceded, not just a magnitude, in fact, it's a prerequisite which goes conceded. 3, it's a default framework in PF, so framework debate is a wash, you're defaulting here. 4, they weigh on probability, but probability is literally subjective. That goes straight conceded because which is about judgment measure, which is back to removes the hands of the debate outside of us, but scope is objective, which means you're always voting on objective impacts, which is easier to weigh and disincentivizes judge intervention. On AI, the US risks losing the ARS. US risks losing the ARS to China due to growing energy demands from AI data centers faces power shortages. SMRs can meet this demand efficiently, but government investment through tax credits and financing needs to happen in order to build the reactors. Without reliable power, AI development stalls, causing extinction through nuclear warfare, which causes a nuclear winter. They give you a couple of responses. They say renewables are solving right now, but our evidence is not solving fast enough. Then they tell you like hegemony is bad, but they can see the hegemony happens in either world. They tell you our evidence is Eurocentric, but it's not empirically. China has attacked. You look what they've done in Hong Kong, and we say empirically at that point you're focusing on empirics. Then they tell you AGI like misaligns, but we argue like AI development happens in both countries. We say we prefer in the US because there's more regulations. Then they say SMRs are bad for the climate. We tell you it's not bad for the climate because there's new innovation to solve back for all of the issues that go straight conceded. Then they tell you like, oh, it takes too long to build. Remember, the SMR evidence takes like 36 months to build, so you can flow right there. On their case, we win climate, we win their argument. Remember, it increases investments into nuclear technology, replaces all the bad nuclear techniques we're doing right now with better techniques like nuclear recycling, which means that we actually don't see any nuclear waste, which means we're winning their argument too. Remember, nuclear energy emits less pollution and less carbon emissions because it's 3 times more efficient, which means we need less plants to do so, which means you need less mining compared to renewables. You need a lot of lithium mining and a lot more mining to build triple the times amount of plants. And remember that like whenever you increase nuclear energy, you replace with renewables because you need trade-off to happen. You need a trade-off to happen with funds, etc. Thus, vote.
Good debate. Thank you, judges.
Do you know? Are they disclosing breaks?
I think they should. They've been disclosing every round.
Yes, we are disclosing when we all come to a decision.